Hey everybody, how's it going today? It's been a slow Friday, so I figured I would get to work on some stuff on the car. What I'm doing right now is getting the passenger side fender on. That way I can get the side skirts on, get that whole side buttoned up. Since I have that door adjusted pretty much the way I want it, I want to get everything else kind of fitted. I'm not going to be doing the driver's side yet because I need a new door, and so it doesn't make any sense to put the fender back on, get everything all buttoned up, and then take it all back off to replace the door. But anyway, fitting these body panels and stuff can be a little bit tricky, so I figured I would just film it and hopefully help somebody out along the way. One thing that I did run into, I did like a preliminary little test fit thing, and I was just going to leave the fender up and then start adjusting it and start from there, but I realized that I hadn't run the cable for the antenna up through the fender, and so I wanted to get that done. And while I was doing that, I was going to put the base for the antenna on, and the holes had kind of been pulled out of the fender. Somebody tightened those screws a little too much and it pulled those holes up, and so the screws didn't want to sit in there quite right. So I figured what I would start with is just kind of showing you guys what I did there to correct that, and it's real simple, so let's get to it. All right, so this is the area I was talking about here, and you've got, where'd they go? You've got these little screws that hold in the base, and these guys, at least this one right here, wanted to just push in, pull out. It didn't want to thread correctly. So all you really need to do is, since those things had been pulled up, you just need to flatten them out a little bit. Now, I didn't get it perfect, partially so I could work on it a little bit more on camera. But basically what I'm going to do here is I'm taking a dolly and putting it up underneath the fender and holding it really, getting a good hold on it so that metal doesn't go anywhere. So that way the only area that it's affecting is this right here, because I don't want to dent the top of the fender. So then what you want to do is take your body hammer and get that thing nice and square under there and just give it a few taps. There we go. See, and that's a little bit better right there. And you just want to make sure that you're hitting the surface with, really flat with the hammer. Because if you come at it from an angle, you're going to dent it. You're not going to get the spot you want. You just tap real lightly. And it should flatten out. It's going to take a little while, but believe me, you want to take your time with it. These are pretty good right now. They're not perfect, but they will work. If you rush through it and try and bang those things into too hard, then you're not going to be doing yourself any favors. You'll dent the fender, and you won't get, you'll create more problems than you solved. I actually just noticed this right here. This is some 3M tape, double-sided tape I was using to hold this guy, this little trim piece on here, because it's kind of broken. So I do need to get that off. So let me do that real quick, and then we'll get back to getting the fender on. Okay, so I realize that this angle is probably not the greatest, but I will move the camera around a little bit and kind of show you the different areas. So really the first thing you want to do here is get your fender just kind of set on into place and kind of get, eyeball it and see what needs to go where and what kind of adjustments you might need to make. Okay, so as I'm looking at it here, this thing's gonna have to sit up a little bit to match up with the cowl. That's okay. And okay, so what I'm gonna do now, I'm going to take and thread in some of these bolts here. I'm not tightening anything down, and I actually had to order a new set of bolts and speed nuts because a lot of them came off stripped and in pretty bad shape when I pulled everything apart. Okay, now I'm going to run these things down a little bit. Not tight at all, but enough to where they'll hold everything where I need them to. And not let things, you know, pull too much in one direction. Okay, so now that I've got those, I'm going to do what I'm going to do here is put in this this bolt at the bottom. Okay, so what I just had to do here is clean the threads on this speed nut, the one that attaches the fender to the bottom of the body of the car. And I could have just put on this brand new speed nut. The reason I didn't is because look at the size of that thing. And then look at that one. The backing on that one is much better. It's much more stable. So I prefer to use the original one if I can. And the threads did clean, so I should be able to throw this back on and we should be okay. Where I'm at now is I've got the three bolts going over the top of the engine bay, and then the one for the brace in the front, and the one down here. And when this fender's just sitting here, it hits the door right here. It's way out at the bottom, and at the cowl here it doesn't match up. So what I'm going to try and do here is lift this up so that the cowl matches right there, and that's about good, and that clears up the majority of the gap issues there. But one thing I am noticing is that when I pounded the bottom of that back in so that the fender didn't stick out, I might have gone a little too far with it, but luckily that's no big deal, because what I can do is use a shim behind the fender and space it out a little bit. I'm going to start a little wide with one of the wider shims and see where that puts me. Okay, so that shim, that didn't work. It's a little too small. So, next size up. All right, what I'm noticing here is that the fender, since it was mounted with that pinch weld pushed in, the fender is actually twisted in a little bit. So We'll try and bend it back a little bit. And that seemed, yeah, that seemed to do the trick. Okay, that is about good. So from here, what I'm gonna do is push this up and make sure that body line and this body line match up and make sure the gap looks good, which it does. And tighten that bad boy down. So basically now what I've got are the bolts in the top, all, you know, loosely in, and I started my adjustment with the bottom. Now, basically, the gap looks pretty good, and the cowl looks pretty good. So, what I'm gonna need to do here is go inside the door, because there's that one nut that goes in that way. Actually, you know what? It looks like I'm a little... Okay, so what I'm gonna do temporarily, because the fender looks like it is a little too tight on the bottom, a little too loose on the top, loose, open on the top. So what I'm actually gonna do is go on the front nut on the fender inside the engine bay and put a temporary shim or two in there just to hold the fender up kind of where I want it, because all this stuff, you know, there's a little bit of give and take. It'll move around a little bit. So, okay. Now loosen this back up. See, this just takes a lot of messing around with to get it right. Every once in a while you get lucky and it pops on the way you want it the first time, but more often than not, you're just gonna have to work with it and play around. And that right there looks about perfect. If I can get it to stay, that's pretty good. Pretty good. All right, and this spot up here, the cowl looks good. We've got a pretty good fender to door line all the way down. Everything seems pretty even. The gaps look good, all that stuff. So this is like, I almost couldn't ask for more on this. It's pretty much exactly where I want it. Okay, so the area I'm gonna be working is right there. Right where my finger is, there is a hole and a speed nut and a mount for that fender. So, all right, and this is why I keep extensions and nuts around, or adapters, I mean, because of situations like this. Now, if you need to, you can adjust the top of the fender a little bit with this spot, because there's a little wiggle room, but hopefully everything kind of lines up pretty well from the get-go and you don't have to mess with it, because that one's pretty hard to get to. Okay, so we got that nice and snug right there. We're not looking for all the way tight just yet. We want to make sure that we leave ourselves a little bit of leeway to come back and loosen it up and adjust anything if we need to. Now we are really ready to go for the front of this. And now, if up to this point you've done everything right, then you should just be able to, like, so the front of the fender wants to kind of just sit back a little bit. You should be able to just kind of grab the wheel well, push it back into place, and check with your finger to make sure that the fender and the cowl match up well, and then start screwing these ones down from this way. Right here, this is where the cowl and the fender meet, and I'm just using one hand to pull this up tight and the other hand to check, and then I'm going to go ahead and tighten this one down so it'll hold it. Okay, so one thing I'm noticing right off the bat here is that when that nut went down, it pulled the fender down past the cowl. So that means is we got to shim it a little bit. Now you can just pick up these shims from, you guessed it, Harbor Freight. Little box, and it comes with a ton of them. And you're just going to squeeze that, if I could get it in the right spot there, in between the fender mount and firewall in there. And we're going to pull that tight again and see how this goes. And this is going to take a little trial and error. I always push those shims like all the way in there so you don't see them too much. Okay, that helped. Not quite as much as I wanted. Take another thin shim. Yeah, the only thing is I wish they offered them in a couple more thicknesses because you're kind of limited, and I prefer not to stack these things too much, but one real thin one on top of another thin one isn't that big of a deal. And that feels much better. Yeah, that feels much better. It's not completely perfect. That's okay. So then what we're gonna do, since that's shimmed up a little bit, I'm going to throw a thin shim under this one, just so it doesn't warp any of the metal or anything. Get it to somewhat match up down the inside of this. And we're going to want to push this fender in a little bit. Okay. And then this last one right here, since I kind of did a shim taper type of thing, this last one right here should sit fine just right where it is. So go ahead and do that. And I'm kind of holding the fender out where I want it with my foot. That way it pushes it where it needs to be. And then you just go ahead and tighten up your brace on the front. Okay. And that should be about it for that. Now, all I need to do is get this guy in here. Pop that on. I did chip the paint a little bit around this when I was flattening out those holes, but you know, it's just kind of the name of the game, I guess. Okay, you want to make sure that those are snug, not tight, because you don't want the same problem now that they've pulled out and then been kind of hammered back into place. The metal might be a little more weak, so you just want to be really careful about that. Luckily this screwdriver's like totally jacked up, so it's not letting me torque these things down. Okay, that should do it right there. Pop your cover back on, and there you go. Now we've got a fender. Boy, that lines up to the door really nice. I mean, check this out. Yeah, I mean, Can't ask for much more than that. That's pretty good. So with these ground effects, you've got your brackets right here and along the bottom, and you know, the matching plastic pieces to go in there. Okay, yeah, you gotta, there we go, kind of come at it at an angle, and then get that front, get this one on the closest to the door on, and then you're gonna have to push it down. And this one was really, really tight before. So, I'm not expecting this to be easy. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is use a little block of wood, try and tap it down. If you have a nice paint job on your car, you don't wanna do what I just did. You really, really don't. So what'll happen here is this bottom piece is sticking out a little bit. Once this gets screwed to the fender and everything, that'll be just fine. And once that goes in, then we're good. All I've got to do there is run the screws up along the bottom and in the wheel well, and then this thing will be good to go. So see how easy that was? And now I've got one of the sides of the car almost put completely together. All right, guys, so there you have it. For anybody that's intimidated by putting body panels together and fitting everything up, it's really not that hard. All you got to do is pay attention to what you're doing and make little adjustments here and there. Move to something else. You might have to come back and make another adjustment, but realistically, you know, that didn't take me very long, and it's a pretty easy thing to do. So that's gonna wrap this video up, guys. I hope that helps somebody out, because I know a lot of you guys out there are, you know, doing your own work, taking stuff off, putting it back on, and you know, it's nice to keep these straight lines in these cars looking straight, and you know, that's how you do it. It's just little by little by little. So I'm gonna run the rest of the screws up through those ground effects, and that's gonna finish it off for me. So until next time, take care, and hope you guys have a good one. One more thing I wanted to add real quick. When you're done with this, if you end up having to make some more adjustments for, you know, the hood or the front bumper or anything like that, when those go on, don't be too surprised, because you don't have any basis for comparison with those things off. So when you get them on, you may have to move some things around a little bit. Easy enough. Just figured I'd let you know, if you're doing this, don't be too surprised if when you close that hood, you know, make sure when you do it for the first time that you let that thing down nice and easy. Nice and easy, because if it, you know, if you push the fender in a little too far on the front, you don't want that hood getting damaged by hitting the fender, and you don't want the fender getting damaged by hitting the hood. So that's really all there is. Just look at it, make your adjustments, and you'll be good to go.